Good morning. Good morning to our audience in Greece and wherever else you're watching this from. I'm Yannis Palaiologos. I'm the EU correspondent of Kathimerini newspaper and Sky Radio and Television. It's my great honor to be able to introduce our next speaker, who is Carl Bildt, the former Prime Minister and former Foreign Minister of Sweden, and a thinker and commentator on a truly global scale. Prime Minister, I would like to ask you to make some opening remarks, and then we can get right down to the interrogation.
Thank you, and good morning to everyone, wherever you are. And it's an honor and a pleasure. It would have been even nicer to be with you in person in Greece, but we are where we are, and we hope that next year or thereafter will be somewhat better in that respect. Yes, some brief remarks on Europe in the post-corona world, whenever that appears. First, of course, decisive is going to be how we manage our economies. Is Europe going to sort of defend its place in the world hierarchy of leading economies? Or are we going to slip further behind if we relate ourselves or compare ourselves to the United States and China, the two other giants that we have in the global economy? We are now in discussion of the major rescue packages. They are national and they're going to be European as well. And quite a number of exemptions to state aid rules and other things. And all of that is absolutely essential in order to get the European economy moving again. But then it is equally important to quickly go back to the normal rules of the game so that we do the things that are necessary to revive the underlying strength of our economies, to do the structural reforms that are going to be necessary, and to make absolutely certain that we get the growth figures back as well, and avoid that we struggle with debt forever in all of the European economies. There's got to be depth, you know that, but we have to limit it as far as we can. We are facing huge transitions in our economies. I mean, the green transition has been talked very much about. That's still going to be on the agenda. I think one of the effects of this particular crisis is that there will be an acceleration of the digital transformation. We are living in a world of Zoom and Netflix and Google and whatever platform we are on at the moment. But clearly the digital transformation is going to accelerate. And Europe has not been doing particularly well in that respect so far. We need to think that through more. Second item just is, of course, the geopolitical situation. There was lots of talk about the geopolitical of Europe and the Commission. We are and I've been talking about the situation that we have now as the example of the post-American world, where we don't see American leadership and we see a fragmentation of the world, and Europe will have to decide whether we are just going to be a play field for others or whether we're going to be able to be a player on the global stage on X numbers of different issues. That has to do with the common foreign and security policy and beef that up, the institutions, the willingness to accept compromises, and perhaps to move away gradually from the principle of unanimity, which has been important to small countries like Greece, like Sweden. But I think we have to rethink that. And just third point, there's a lot of talk about sort of this being sort of endangering or ending the age of globalization. That is not in the interest of Europe. We Europeans are traders. That's what we've done through history. Our most glorious period in history are when we've been reaching out to the world and trading with the world. That might be Greece or that might be Sweden, but we are equally open to the world. And I think it will be one of the key tasks of Europe in the years ahead to try to preserve and try to promote as much as we can an open global economy, an open trading regime, and others. And that we'll have to do against an America that tends to go off in the other direction somewhat, and a China which has a more sort of mercantilist impulse, but which we must try to engage in order to preserve a global open economy that is so important to the future prosperity in Europe. I think I leave it with those few remarks.
Right, a lot to grapple with there, and everyone's talking about the need for Europe to become more sovereign, more autonomous, and of course that starts with building up its strength and its solidarity within. In that context, the European Commission recently unveiled its proposal for a recovery package worth 750 billion euros, which includes novel things like EU debt issuance on a major scale, 500 billion in grants for those hardest hit by the crisis. What is your assessment of that recovery proposal? And Sweden, we know, is one of the frugal four countries which has objections to it. What would it take for Sweden to get on board?
I think the frugal four, and I don't necessarily know all of them, but I know Sweden fairly well. The frugal four thing started really with the multi-year financial framework, where Sweden, among others, have been among those that have been advocating not necessarily less money, but money in a somewhat different ways. I mean, we've been sort of critical over the years to get sort of a lot of the agricultural subsidies, a lot of the others, what we consider fairly old stuff that's in the budget, and wanted to redirect that more to sort of research and development and security and those issues that we consider more interesting from the more futuristic point of view. The package has then come on top of that, and that is a novelty. I think sort of Sweden will not, or the frugal four will not object to the principle of that one. I think they will have views on the divisions between the loans and the grants. I personally think that is not necessarily that important a point, because if you have a very, very long term loan with practically no interest and no paying back within any time that is relevant, it becomes a grant de facto. But I mean, I think they will sort that one out. I'm somewhat concerned that the program isn't sufficiently front-loaded, that it's going to take time to get that money out to the relevant member states. We want something that is substantial and quick in terms of helping the immediate recovery. And then, as I said, really then go back to where we were as soon as possible, and the other things that are necessary in order to get the growth going in a somewhat more normal and competitive way.
What strengths and weaknesses of the EU has the pandemic and the pandemic response highlighted so far, in a nutshell?
Well, it has highlighted some of the weaknesses, of course, but that's, you can say that is to some extent the pattern, in the sense that during the past decade, we have been hit by the one crisis after the other that was not foreseen. We had the Euro crisis starting in 2010. No question that sort of Europe was stumbling there for a while in the beginning. We had the refugee crisis of 2015. No question that we were stumbling there in the beginning. We were stumbling in the beginning of this particular crisis as well, primarily when it came to the single market, when we saw sort of borders coming up and we saw restrictions. I mean, I found it highly irritating. We had Swedish companies delivering or having under contract to deliver medical equipment to Spain and to Italy, and they were stopped, just confiscated in France. I think the Commission worked quite effectively after a while in order to get those things away. So that was not very impressive. I think there has been an impressive mobilization of intellectual and financial firepower in order to help the recovery of the economy. That applies to the ECB and what they've done. That's been fairly decisive and fairly quick. And also the discussions that we now have on the recovery package. I mean, it's going to take a couple of months to get a discussion on it, but a decision on it, but it's moving fairly fast.
Yeah, much faster than in previous crises, certainly.
Yes.
Let me ask you about an issue that is of particular concern to us here in Greece, and that is Turkey. Should the EU be concerned about the pretensions to regional influence that Turkey is asserting with increasing strength? And is it time for a change of strategy towards Turkey by the EU?
Perhaps it is. Turkey's a big place. It's a big issue. It's a complicated country. I don't need to explain that to you. It is in an extremely uncomfortable situation that has primarily to do, I mean, go back 20 years or something like that. Well, yeah, 20 years in time when sort of the reforms started. They went through a big financial crisis, political crisis. The political landscape was transformed. AK, Erdogan appeared. And we had a very impressive European-oriented reform period in Turkey where they did quite a lot to modernize their economy, quite a lot to open up that democratic system, quite a lot to become European. And that is why the accession negotiations were also started. But as we've seen often past in Turkish history, it goes back and forth. And we are now in a situation since quite some time ago where they've been, in my opinion, sort of dragged down into the mess of the Middle East. The Syrian conflict has been disastrous from the Turkish point of view, and all of the fissures that have opened up also inside Turkey. Then they become embroiled in a larger regional game, as we have seen, with sort of Turkey, Qatar versus Egypt, Emirates, and you see that reflected in Libya. You see the fact that we have failed to solve the Cyprus issue, which I think still is one of the biggest failures that we have on the European side. Have we been able to get an agreement on Cyprus, and it's been very, very close several times, then I think we would have been in a better situation. I mean, Turkey can't be ignored. You need to engage it, but you need to have an understanding of the complexity of the way that Turkish history moves back and forth.
And is there something the EU needs to do in terms of rethinking its relationship with Turkey at this point? Something to put it on a different footing, because the old framework seems to be increasingly, not working. Put it that way.
No, it's we need to think that through. I think Greece has an important role to play there for X numbers of historical and geographical reasons. Greece has been so consistent in saying we need to have an open approach to the possibility of, I don't think membership of Turkey at the moment is very much on the agenda, to put it mildly, but not closing the door. We need to engage them, because otherwise you end up in all sorts of other troubles. I think we need to modernize the customs union arrangement. That is in our mutual interest. We need to have a more engaged foreign policy dialogue with them, and that has been complicated. President Erdogan is not the most easy of personalities around, and you need to engage with him on the highest level, and we had that before. When there were sort of regular meetings on the highest levels. Those meetings have been going down in frequency. They have been difficult, but I think you need to have them. So engage with increasing frequency. And as I said, Greece has a particular role to play in that respect.
All right, let me move you to the other side of the Atlantic, and another leader who's not perhaps the easiest to work with. This has been a very challenging period for transatlantic relations. One thing I wanted to ask you, given all the turbulence we're seeing in the US in recent weeks, are you concerned about the continuing turmoil and political instability in the run-up to, or even perhaps beyond, the next election?
I am. Neither of us has been to the United States in the past few months, obviously, so we don't have the exact feeling of it. But I speak quite a lot to sort of my American friends over these particular digital instruments, and there's a rapidly rising level of worry about what's going to happen in the next 7-8 months, with an extremely polarized climate, with things happening that we didn't think were possible, and with the possibility of a contested election, what's going to happen there. So I think we have to be sort of concerned with what's going to happen with our American friends. Not very much we can do about it. And then let's just hope that it works out for the best. But it is deeply worrying.
And you mentioned in your opening remarks the geopolitical rivalry which is heating up between China and the US, which is the defining geopolitical rivalry of the age. Do you think that, because there is a lot of bipartisan support in the US for challenging China, do you think the tension will continue under a possible Biden administration? And what can the EU do to best handle itself in that rivalry and avoid being dragged into it?
I think we'd continue under a Biden presidency, if there's such a thing. It might sort of be somewhat moderated in terms of the tone, but I think the substance is going to be roughly the same. And we have, and that's been building up for quite a number of years, the entire national security establishment of the United States, when they talked about the age of great power competition and things like that. That is no longer Russia primarily, that is increasingly China. And a lot of US security planning is related to China, be that military, be that the global race for technology, be that trade issues. It's China, 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 and that will not change very much. So we have to be ready for that. Where is Europe in this? I think we need to develop our China policy. We need to be united as much as we can, and there have been some problems with that. Greece has been, to a certain extent, been part of that problem, in my opinion, when it comes to sort of reluctance of Greece to have the EU say anything about human rights violations in China. We must have a China policy on two legs. First, the engagement with China on X numbers of issues, open global trade, climate, global health, you name it, but also clear on the values. And human rights is part of that. And this is important not only to be able to engage China constructively, but also in order to be able to engage the United States on China policy. But because a number of these issues, say the trade issues, we can only be effective versus China if we are united across the Atlantic. But in order to be united across the Atlantic, I think we need to have a firm base in our own European approach to China.
All right, we have about 3 minutes left. I wanted to touch also on the issue of the EU's climate ambitions, which were the defining characteristic of the new von der Leyen Commission. Do you think the EU can stick to those ambitions despite the vast amount of time and resources it will have to spend in tackling the pandemic?
I think it can, and I think it will. I think there will obviously be some delay in taking the decisions that are necessary. Part of that can be explained by the fact that the COP26 conference has been delayed 1 year, so we've got 1 year more. We can say that emissions have gone down as part of the crisis, so we can afford that. But I think, as you see in Brussels, the tendency is also to use all of the recovery money to some extent facilitate the green transition. But both the green transition and the digital transition, I think, are absolutely key to the economic and accordingly political future of Europe.
And just very quickly, as a last question, are there certain leadership qualities? We've seen all countries in the world dealing with the same issue in the last few months. Are there certain leadership qualities and leadership flaws that you've noted being highlighted by the pandemic response in different places?
I think one remark that should be made, and that's related to China. I mean, some people are saying the authoritarian model works. Look at the countries that have been doing the best. That's sort of been South Korea, that's been Taiwan, sort of, that's been Singapore. Those have been the sort of open societies. Open society tends to be messy sometimes, but they're more agile in a situation like this. There's no question that the Chinese messed it up in the beginning. Then they took very forceful measures and got it under control. But there were other small democracies in East Asia that did it far better. And that, I think, is a lesson that we should take with us from this particular crisis.
Prime Minister, that's all the time we have. Thank you very much for being with us. Thank you to our audience for watching, and stay tuned for what's coming next. Have a good day.
Thank you. Thank you. A pleasure.